Good afternoon and welcome everyone to our session today. We're privileged and honored to have our very own Nichelle Ahmadiyya. She's the she's the Chief Operating Officer for Citrus. And we have Dr. Bob Fisicaro, who is currently the Superintendent of Schools in Haddon Township, New Jersey, which is a K-12 school system in Camden County, PA. His experiences in school leadership and school business administration, including 20 years of experience in pre-K through 12th education as a superintendent, principal, assistant principal, and teacher. His work also includes leadership experience with the New Jersey Department of Education. And under his leadership, the Mantua Public School District became one of only 5 districts in the country to be named a National School District of Character in the year 2018. So welcome, Bob. And thank you, Nichelle, again, for being with us as our Chief Operating Officer, as well as our helping facilitate this conversation. Today's topic is implementing change in schools, 5 tips for success. So with that, I will let you guys get started. I will exit the stage and I'll see you at the end of the webinar. Thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Hey.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for being here, Bob. I love your resume. I love how you've had so much success in implementing different programs, particularly to the point where you became a National School of Character. That is amazing. You know, we value National Schools of Character here at Citrus. We wanted to have this conversation about implementing change in schools. It's always really important if you're looking at improving, that means change, but it's particularly key in this time when we're having pandemics and change around technology and the great exit, the great resignation and all those other things. So I am excited to have you present to us 5 tips for success. Before we start, I just wanted to get some sense from you. How are you faring in your school district with your teachers, and how are you dealing with teacher turnover?
We're doing very well in Haddon Township. I have I feel blessed to work with a remarkable staff. It's a very dedicated Board of Education, a very, very emotionally intelligent. We'll talk about that today, but it's a very emotionally intelligent administrative team and a caring community. So, we have persevered quite well through this pandemic. And, I'm very fortunate to be in a leadership role here in Haddon Township.
That's awesome. And I'm sure that has something to do with your leadership and the way you manage change, which is why we are asking you to share with our audience today your 5 tips for success. So I'm going to go ahead and let them hear that. We have 30 minutes. So thank you very much. What's your first tip for success?
Well, I think we have a little bit of a handout or a slide.
I'll bring it up for you if you would like.
I think my first tip is to really understand the brain, right? And what change actually means in the brain. So, when you think of the brain, you have this left side of the brain, and really what that represents is logic, reason, and rationale. So when we make changes with the left side of our brain, we do it, logically. I don't like this situation. This is my plan to resolve it, and this is how I'm going to execute the problem-solving mechanism, right? So this is the side of the brain that helps us set our New Year's resolutions. On the right side of the brain, that's dominated by emotion, right? Your imagination, your dreams, your creativity. And this side of the brain helps us break our New Year's resolution. So the first thing that folks should understand is when it comes to change, when these two sides of the brains disagree, the right side of the brain is going to win every time. That's why we break our New Year's resolutions very, very quickly sometimes. So if you go to the next slide, I have a nice diagram that kind of explains this, right? So we've all kind of seen this, elephant and a rider at the circus here, and this woman is riding this elephant in the circle, and it's an illusion that she's in control of the elephant. Well, in this picture, the woman represents the left-hand side of the brain, right? It's very much an illusion that the logic and reason and rational side of our brain is in control. It's really not, because if this elephant and this woman disagree on which direction to go, the elephant's going to win every single time.
Absolutely.
So the key to this is to be able to direct the rider and motivate the elephant, right? It's no good when it comes to change just to teach people why the change is important. You know, education without energy is not very good. Knowledge without motivation is only good if you want to read a book. But if you want to lead people, it's pretty useless, right?
Yeah.
On the flip side of that is if we only motivate the elephant with no clear direction, it's very dangerous, because now you have a lot of energy with no direction. You're not going to have any laser focus to anything. So it's a very delicate balance of what we call directing the rider and motivating the elephant. And this concept is laid out beautifully in this book called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. I would encourage folks to consider reading some of it or looking at some of their work. They do an excellent job explaining this. So
great. And that's that book you included in the handout that will be shared with our viewers today. So if you are interested in reading that book, you can get that title through the handout. So if we are running around and not using our logic, but being emotional, we got chaos in the middle of everything.
100%. You know, a lot of impulse, it's dangerous, right? And
Right.
we certainly, you know, for those of us who work in schools, we know folks that are dominated by emotion, right? And they can be very dangerous if there's not a knowledge balance to that. And folks who have that are knowledge dominant have a hard time getting things done. They're good at planning, but poor at executing.
Absolutely. And it's funny because you see people being emotional, but if you think of them, the emotional side of you, the irrational side of you being an elephant, you can see where that can be. This big elephant running around can cause a lot of damage. So, so what do you do? How do you address that and make sure that the rider is in control and in agreement?
So later in the talk today, we're going to talk about strengths, right? Everyone has different strengths. So I guess when you assemble teams, you want to make sure that you have a balance of folks on the team. You want to have your most educated folks, your most knowledgeable folks that you trust with content, and also people on the team who know how to motivate others and to get things done. So this is a great kind of discussion point for how to assemble balanced and productive teams.
Awesome. That's really a good key point. All right. I think you can control this if you want to. You can just hit the say. Yeah.
All right, very good. So, you know, after we understand this whole idea of a change process, you know, there's a kind of a few steps here. You know, the first step would be communication, right? You know, this idea of clarity dissolving resistance. In my experience, sometimes leaders are reluctant to communicate because we're afraid how the message is going to be interpreted. So no message goes out. Okay? And when no message goes out, fear takes over.
Yes.
Right? Which is right brain. And that could be more of a problem than no message at all. So step one has to be to show up and to communicate clearly whether or not the audience agrees with the message or doesn't agree with the message. Because if you communicate clearly and they understand it, whether or not they agree or disagree, they won't fear it. They won't fear it. So communication, showing up and communicating, especially during a pandemic, that's like 75, 80% of the work right there.
It's always communication first, right? But I like how you distinguish between agreement about the message versus actually delivering the message. That I think that is something that people forget, that you can have to deliver it and then have the discussion about agreement and stuff. So
Yeah.
Clarity.
And another thing is, I think school leaders really miss this. And I talk a lot in our county and a lot with our community about understanding this. And I can't overstate this enough. And that's this idea of a strategy has to drive a structure. Form follows function. School budgets are passed, 1 year at a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times I see school budgets are passed in April, and then the district is scrambling at the end of the year and the chaos of the end of the year to come up with goals. Right. Sometimes in September, the goals haven't even been set yet, right?
Wow.
So the district goals have to drive the budget, right? Because and resources must be aligned according to the goals, because that's how you actually execute. But this is a missing step, I think, in a lot of places.
I immediately think of deciding that I'm going to have some money and not knowing what I'm going to do with that windfall or something, because I have never set a goal about what I want to do with my my life. With that windfall, like, oh, what windfall? But yes, what type of goals have you set with your district sometimes that okay, now I can throw the money at it now that I know?
Yeah, so for an example of that would be this, mental health, right? Student mental health coming through the pandemic. Another thing would be, helping to educate our highest students and our most struggling students, right? Mm-hmm. So public schools across the country, it's easiest to teach to the middle. But, you really have to work hard to, make that ceiling high for students who have the ability to reach it, or to differentiate, through response to intervention for students who may be behind grade level, but not under the umbrella of special education. So those are two examples where we create these clear goals that we need to improve in these areas. And it helps me as a superintendent to hire an extra guidance counselor for next year, hire an extra nurse, hire an extra gifted and talented teacher. And then other things at times need to be sacrificed, maybe through attrition, or other programs need to be sunsetted because they're no longer as important as the district goals. District goals have to be sacred, and school budgets are done 1 year at a time. That means to me, like, a plan needs to be done 1 year at a time. Be part of a larger strategic plan, but it's executed, implemented 1 year at a time.
I love that. I really appreciate that.
Got it. Step 3, develop some type of secret sauce and a delivery of discipline. All right. And I love this next slide, right? Because administratively, we try to do too many things. So we talk about this at administrative team meetings all the time. And that is, the time for implementation is in September and October. So right now we're sitting on the end of March. Like, my administrators know, do not come to me with any new idea. Right? We're not implementing anything. The window for implementation is there. Okay, September, October.
Right.
During the months of November to January, there's the time where you want to kind of monitor and adjust your implementation. And beginning in February, after this implementation has had a chance to be tweaked, that's really where you want to evaluate the implementation and say, was it good? Was it average? Was it lousy? And you begin to make a plan for the following year to align your budget and district goals. Which, again, the budget, the goal is driving the budget. After that budget is passed in April, then it's all about communication, May to August. It's just communicate in as many different ways as you can with as many different people, so everyone understands what the plan is for September. The reason I call this a secret sauce is because almost nobody does it like this, right? In every school, we try to implement, monitor, adjust, evaluate, and plan and communicate all at the same time.
Yes.
Where if you follow some type, and it doesn't have to be exactly like this. This kind of breakout has worked for me over the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. Folks can tinker around with the months and the dates, but everyone should develop some type of secret sauce where they're only doing one thing at a time, because when you do one thing at a time, you get a lot more done. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And again, it's a little bit exaggerated, but for the most part, this is what we try to pledge allegiance to.
I am a person who's had in the past done surveys for this delivery of services, and we wanted to see what impact we were having, if there was satisfaction with the services. And we always tend to do it in February and April through that time period so that we can make adjustments for
Sure.
September and plan accordingly. So, but I like the secret sauce. We can't lose the secret sauce part, because yes, there was planning, there was monitoring, there was implementation, and I had to learn to say, no, we're not doing anything new. So let me ask you about the bringing new ideas to the table, and during February and April, how do you manage to say, okay, I'm planning, I'm evaluating whether this is working, at the same time, yes or no, and then I'll keep it, or I want to try something new. Does it make sense? Like,
yeah, sure.
The balance of that.
Yeah, it's very much a balance of, three things: direct observation, and quantitative and qualitative feedback, right? So you always want to be observing, and you always want to be collecting. And it can't just be one person. It has to be a team of folks. These are district goals. So, the administrative leadership team, leadership council, whatever districts have, triangulating direct observation with data collection. And then through that process, you evaluate. I think parents should be a big part of that. I think teachers should be a big part of that. And a lot of these change efforts need to be formed in a partnership.
That's awesome. Sounds like a great secret sauce to me. I don't think it's so secret anymore, though. Thank you for sharing it.
Very good. Okay, step 4. There's so many initiatives, and this one kind of is so important. There's so many initiatives that are deficit driven, right? Mm-hmm. And look at it from a student's perspective. Right, you're not great at reading, so we give you extra reading homework. You're really bad at reading, give you an extra reading class. You're still bad at reading after the extra reading class, we'll give you an after-school reading assignment. Right? It's just we're constantly coming at things from a disorder or a deficit-based process. Mm-hmm. But we forget how powerful it is to flip that around and to really empower people to lead according to their strengths. So you have a teacher that's not using any technology. What are we going to do? We're going to send them to professional development to learn how to use all the technology in the world, instead of identifying some simple technology for that teacher to use and then empowering them to whatever they do best to keep doing that. Right. Because we're human beings. That means we enjoy what we're good at, and we're good at what we enjoy. So there's a tremendous amount of now options to identify, to do a strengths finder, survey with staff, even students. I've done this work with students. Parents can do this work. Mm-hmm. So instead of labeling kids with oppositional defiant disorder or attention deficit disorder or all these different types of, obsessive compulsive disorder, to really, let's drop those labels and let's label them things with things that are more positive, and to help them really be mindful of their strengths and play to your strengths. So there's a few books here, or, you can kind of Google these things, but the idea would be find the best in people and follow those bright spots.
And you're not only just saying that. We actually at Citrus have used the Strength Finders, the second book that's listed there, and we have a whole program on that. And one of your schools was involved in that, and you didn't just let them take the Strength Finders and find out about themselves, which is a really good feel good activity, like, oh, look what I'm good at, look what I'm good at. But you actually put something in place for them to able to express it to others and for others to see what they are good at. I mean, you know better than me. Can you talk a little bit about it?
It totally transformed the culture because it really helped you help people understand one another. You know, it absolutely helped people understand one another and how to relate to each other. And it also added a layer of diversity into the staff that we didn't know that was there, right? So you have, two teachers that could be working across the hall, and one could be a learner and could be strategic, and the other one could have different strengths. Maybe they're an activator, or they have woo, or and we put those strengths. After they took the survey and they had their top 5 strengths identified, they hung those on the outside of the door. And as they hung on the outside of the door, it really helped one another and administrators. As we walked in, we saw what their strengths were on the outside of the door, and it really helped frame conversations with them, right? So, someone's number one leadership strength might have been woo, which is the most rare. They wanted to talk about their weekend. They wanted to talk to, all types of conversations. While someone else that was an executor, we knew not to ask them about their weekend. We just needed to ask them about, is the unit plan, when will the unit plan be ready? So, and then we did that work for kids, so, we did for grade 4 and up. And they had it on their desks, their top strengths. So, and it really helped build their self-concept, right? Yes. Kids don't make decisions cause and effect. Kids make decisions based on, who am I? What would a person like me do in this situation? And if the answer to who am I is, I'm a kid with a disorder, I'm a kid with this, or my teacher doesn't like me, then the answer to the second question, what would a person like me do in that situation? Not do my homework, not work hard, right? Throw the eraser across the room, whatever it may be.
Right.
So helping them identify a positive self-concept of, I'm a dreamer, I'm a learner, I'm an activator. It's really powerful work. I would highly recommend this to anyone in the country. I think this is some of the most powerful work in the country that's not being utilized by very many school districts.
Right. So I love it. As a former school counselor, I am all about looking at the kid and seeing the kid for what they can do and not necessarily what they can't do. And the same for adults in the world. So, but sometimes your strengths may not match up so well with the change implementation process or the initiative that we may have. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I just read in my doctorate work right now, someone said, resistance to change doesn't need to be addressed, but embedded in the implementation process. What do you say to that?
Yeah, so I come back with the whole idea of emotional fuel, right? And I think we're just scratching the surface for people to understand emotional health. Everyone talks about mental health, but it's really emotional health from where I see it, right? So let's go back to the student with a reading deficit. Okay, and then I'll use a personal story. Okay. Student has a reading deficit. They need that extra reading class, but they might be a great artist, right? So if you give them, instead of once a week going to art class, how about you give them an art class every single day, first period? And then they'll be fed, right? Emotionally fed. Their emotional fuel is high. So then they have more fuel and more perseverance to get through that reading class. This work is actually laid out beautifully in a book called The Shutdown Learner by Rich Selznick. I don't have that on my handout, but since you asked the question.
Yes.
Rich is a psychologist at a Cooper Learning Center, and he talks about these shutdown learners. And the opportunity is they don't have enough opportunity to engage with things that they like and they're good at. So, it's something that, resistance to change oftentimes is because people are not able to accept change because we're not empowering them with other components of the process that they actually like and believe in. That makes sense to you.
And I think that should be added to your 5 tips. Empower them for during parts of the process. Actually, this is my chance to plug Grow, because that is one of the things we have, the Grow model, which is a continuous improvement process that does gather data, including the strengths of the staff. We focus on the staff first, and then we have them look at the data and come up with a plan and renew their focus on their strengths, come up with a plan utilizing their strengths and just addressing the school climate, so that their foundation for any implementation for change is done. In other words, just like you said, they're being fed. We set up a plan for them to be fed emotionally and be ready to do the work of the reading class after they got the art class. Sure. To use that. But I would love to hear your personal experience. You said you would share a personal one after. Do you remember what it was?
So the personal one, it happens. It's an example of emotional jewel. It's like, okay, we go to my wife and I, we're coming up on 19 years, right? A lot
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I was talking to her.
So every wedding we always been to, every wedding we've ever been to, the first question that she asked me, hey, do you want to dance? Right? My first answer is always no, because what do I want to do at a wedding? I want to eat, right? Because that's what I'm good at and that's what I like to do. But after I eat, then I'm able to dance, right? Because it's a more palatable experience. So a lot of times with these change efforts, we're just like making folks drink from a fire hose for things that they're either not good at or not interested in or don't believe in, and we forget to balance that with things that that they'll like and enjoy. We just did this on Friday, right? We are in Haddon Township. We are in the throes of developing a strategic plan. We're asking all teachers to take a very long survey. There's a qualitative component to it. Mm-hmm. It's like the last thing teachers want to do on a Monday afternoon, right? So on Friday, we had a district-wide wellness day, where we, created a menu of things, and we brought health coaches in and did yoga classes, breath work, movement. We brought in a chef. And we basically let them choose which sessions that they were the most interested in, so they could be kind of emotionally fed. So now, we're really set up for a great stretch now moving forward. And March is generally a really tough month on teachers. And so to balance the challenges of March with a wellness day, I think can go a very long way.
I love that you shared that example, because it's easy to give us tips and suggest strategies, but you are showing in that example that you're actually doing what you're suggesting and it's working. Because I go back to you letting us know that your teachers are pretty much stable and not there's not a lot of turnover like at some other places. Sure. I would like to suggest invite anybody who's on to share their questions at any point now. I have one more question that I would like to share with you. Oh, I'm sorry, you had one more. Go ahead.
Just last slide, but let folks ask whatever.
I want to invite them to share.
Last slide.
You go ahead. I'm waiting for them to jump in.
All right, very good. And I think the last tip is for school leaders to remember to play offense, right? And and I do this, with my daily calendar. There's got to be some type of morning routine. For me, that represents a certain wake up time, a certain level of movement in the morning before I, come into work. A practice of getting in schools early in the day, not scheduling meetings first thing in the morning, because if you schedule meetings first thing in the morning, you're sure to get locked in your office for the rest of the day. So to really, again, it's a kind of strategy, drive, structure light here. The same thing that you do for a school year, you have to do for a week or even a day. Start with 5 things that you want to get done, that day, and accomplish those things before noon, because you never know what that afternoon piece is going to bring. There are people in every organization that may be kind of energy vampires, or meetings that, you have to go to or have. Put all those things after lunch. So the morning routine is to create as much momentum as you can. Daniel Pink wrote a book called When. Talks about when to do stuff, and when he talks about productivity, and during the course of a day, this rise in energy, dip, and trough, and then rise again. One of the things that really helps energy is just try to build in a practice of a 10-minute break, whether you need to go sit in the car for 10 minutes or shut your lights out in your office or somewhere. Take a break, 10 minutes.
Yes.
Any other, folks need to kind of find what works for them, but there should be, several elements throughout the day of self-care, whether it's breath work or lots of water, mild exercise. And then I think where we all struggle because of these computers that we're carrying around called phones, but they're really computers, is, let's leave those phones out of the bedroom and develop strong sleep hygiene and sleep rituals where you have a set bed.
That's a hard one. That's a hard one, Bob.
It's probably the toughest one on there, but if you can really dial into a good, sleep rituals, I think it can be very, very helpful.
I have one question. Someone asked, what additional things do you or your school do to continue to focus on staff strengths throughout the year?
Yeah, I think we spend a lot of time. I recommend the survey, right? So everyone can understand what their strengths are. But you spend a lot of time. If you don't have the resources to actually have the survey, where you don't have the ability to hear your top 3 or top 5 strengths, spend time learning what staff like about their job the most. Right. So I'm in the process of meeting with all 271 employees in Haddon Township.
Impressive.
In the district, yeah. They're 10 to 15 minute meetings, but one of the questions that I ask is, what do you like most about your job? Right. And most of the time it's, I love teaching the kids, or I like a certain content area, or I like the leadership component of this, or I'm really into this part of staff development. And that's kind of the takeaway for, that's what they're good at, right? That's the strength,
right.
Most of the time. So putting people in places where things that they enjoy, and protecting them from areas that may be real toxic areas, so to the best of our ability, right? Nobody likes standardized testing, but the state makes us do it, so we just kind of have to all bite the bullet on that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I hope that answers it. Yeah.
You hope what?
I hope that answers it.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's great. One other question, and then I think we should close out, unless someone feels like they need to get a question and they should get it in now. But how do you handle late adopters? Those you're implementing change, you're implementing a initiative, something that you budgeted for. Now this is the district goals, and so you have somebody who's saying, I'm going to wait and see.
Yep.
How effective this initiative is, or what the results are. How do you handle those?
There's a great book called Tribal Leadership, right? And the tribal leadership basic, I don't remember the author, but one of the concepts in the book is don't pay too much attention to the late adopters. Giving the late adopters negative attention is empowering them, right? Mm-hmm. Try to get 80%, which represent a critical mass, to be bought in to the implementation process, right? If you're able to get to that 80% mark of people that are bought in, the power of that 80% will kind of, these are social organizations too. Yes. The power of that 80% will kind of pull the late adopters along.
Right. Right.
So I try to have a lot of patience. We try to get to 80%, and then we kind of trust that, you know, the next 20% will fall in line. But guess what happens? You really only ever get to 95, maybe 98% in a place like Haddon Township. And you're always going to have that toxic 2%. And I think, don't spend a lot of time and energy there. You know, be happy with the 98%. At that point, you've achieved change.
Exactly. And late adopters do not have to necessarily impede change, in my experience. Yes, they may be a little bit unhappy, but if you're doing work that's making a difference, you can't argue with results, right? All right. So I think that covers all our questions. So I want to remind you that you have a handout that was shared with you. You can download it. Thank you very much, Bob, for sharing that handout. Thank you very much for sharing all your knowledge, all your experiences, and even making recommendations on the books that we have. Any books that you mentioned that aren't on the handout, I would ask that Suzanne or you or someone in the organization get that information, and we'll share it out to our listeners and those who attended today. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I enjoy talking with you always.
Thank you, Michelle. Same here. And if anybody wanted to email me, the email's at the bottom of the screen there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that folks may have offline.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, super. Thank you, Nichelle and Bob, for being with us today. This was really informative. I love all the information about the secret sauce and having a clear direction and aligning your budget with your goals and really focusing on strengths. I think that's so important. And Bob, to your point, too much in our world right now focuses on the deficits, the disabilities, the disorders, the dysfunction. So I think focusing on strengths, what's right with people, and keeping them in their lane is a great suggestion. So thank you for everything you contributed today. Thank you to all of our participants. We appreciate your attendance on today's webinar, and any questions about Citrus, our Grow model, or our character initiatives, please reach out to any one of us, and our website is citrus.org, CITRS. So have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.